Hello. The reason that I left the Church of Christ cult is because I started studying the Bible and in withdrawal from benzos after the really acute part. I realized that the Church of Christ isn't in the Bible. And so basically, I believe in Jesus still, and I was like raised to only think that it was okay to be in the Church of Christ. Like, if you're not in the Church of Christ, then you can't go to heaven. And that's what I was always taught. And I was taught that I had to take the Lord's Supper on Sunday morning and then go Sunday night and then Wednesday night. And then I had to be water baptized. So I was water baptized when I was 11. If you're not water baptized and you don't go to the Church of Christ without instruments and without kitchens and food and stuff in the building, then you are not saved. So it kept me in there for a really long time. But when I became an adult and I was on medication, like the whole time, it was hard to know what was going on. But then when I went off of medication 3 years ago and my mind started clearing, after I got out of the acute part of withdrawal, I started listening to audiobooks of the Bible. I listened to Hebrews a lot because I thought if I have it on all night, like even though I can only sleep like kind of halfway and like an hour at a time, like if I wake up and I am scared and I can hear the Bible, then I'll feel better. And so I started listening to Hebrews, and there was parts of Hebrews that were interesting to me, like the priesthood and the Sabbath stuff, and like the Melchizedek, it mentions him, that priesthood. So I like started to be able to read better without having like visual problems. And I started studying, and I started getting curious about I just thought in my head, like, what are the main things that separate the Church of Christ from the other churches? Like, what are the main things they think are, like, just not debatable? And that would be the water baptism and the taking the Lord's Supper the first day of the week, every week, because those are the two main things besides, like, being modest and straight. Like, you're supposed to take the Lord's Supper every week, and it's supposedly a commandment. And then you're supposed to get water baptized, because if you're not, you can't go to heaven. So my husband had been studying for a longer time than me about baptism, and he had showed me before when I was like on my medication. He like showed me all these verses about like why that's not biblical, but I was scared and I rejected it, and it made me angry, because I was taught to reject any other information, because I thought I was going by the Bible, and like I thought they were going by the Bible, and I thought I had to like listen to them. So when my mind started clearing and I started studying stuff and I started looking into water baptism and the Lord's Supper thing, I realized that it wasn't true. It's not in the Bible. Like, sure, like, there's definitely water baptism in the Bible. I'm not saying it's not in the Bible. I'm just talking about how it doesn't save you. Like, salvation is a free gift from God, and water baptism doesn't give you that. So there's nothing that we can, like, actually do. But I do believe in baptism, and I'm baptized, and, like, I got baptized again, too, like 4 years ago. But my point isn't about baptism. I'm just saying, There's nothing wrong with baptism, and you should be like, I think people should be baptized if they're a Christian. But like, it doesn't save you, like the Church of Christ teaches. And then the Lord's Supper on the first day of the week thing, like I studied that as well, and that's not something that they did. That's just something that's mentioned one time, and the only time that the words Lord's Supper is in the Bible is actually when Paul is telling people not to do a Lord's Supper at Passover, because he's saying when Jesus had the Passover, he broke the bread and took the cup after the food. So it wasn't supposed to be a supper. So there's nowhere else that talks about the Lord's Supper. There's only when it says they broke bread on the first day of the week. But I looked into that, and like I studied that, and when I realized that it wasn't in the Bible, I was so happy. It did not take long after I studied, and I ended up reading the whole Bible, but I left before I even read the whole thing. I read the whole thing to decide what I interpreted it as, how I believed. And yeah, once I studied enough, I knew that it was time for me to leave. And I just like knew that I wasn't gonna go to hell. Like I just knew that I was still gonna be saved. Like I knew that I could leave. So I just like texted my husband one day and I said, I am not gonna go back to that church. I'm done. So he was really, really happy because he never wanted me to keep going. He just like went, we took our kids there, but I realized like I don't want my kids to learn that stuff because they're just like teaching fake stuff. Like they're like requiring people to like do all these things that aren't even biblical, and I'm tired of it. So I was really just able to leave just like that. I mean, I had been studying for a while, and there were lots of things in the past that like really felt really wrong, and I knew something was wrong, but I always just thought it was me. So once I realized it wasn't even biblical, that made it easiest for me to leave, because I was always taught like we need to follow the Bible, and like we have to follow the Bible. And so when I was reading the Bible and I realized like I'm an adult and I can read this and like I can decide what I think it's saying, and other people will agree with me, and I'm not just making this up. This church is just not biblical. Once I was able to use the Bible to justify leaving that church, it was just a lot easier for me just because I was like using the Bible. So if you're in a religion or a church or whatever, and you feel like something's wrong, it's probably because there's something wrong. So a lot of churches have stuff wrong with them, because being a Christian is about serving others and loving others and like helping each other. There's specifically so much talk about helping the orphans and the widows. It's not about going to a building and yelling and singing songs and listening to someone preach at you or whatever. It's about like loving each other and following God's ways and trying to reach out to others. Like, it's not about the other stuff. So I really feel for people who are stuck in religions and can't get out, or they're like kids still, or they live with someone who they like have to go with them. That's really hard. I feel like I was mentally kind of leaving before I even like went off medication, but I didn't realize it till after. But I just like, I knew stuff was wrong, and like I just like knew that it was wrong. That's all. So if you know something's wrong, whether it's a church or a relationship or whatever, you're probably right. you should trust your instinct, because instinctively I knew lots of stuff was wrong, but I was programmed to like not believe that and like ignore that and just do the rules. So if something feels wrong, it's probably because it is.